Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Anthony Kaoli. I'm the Regional Director for the Alaska Region TTA Center, and I'm moderating today, and I also have Angela Camus, our Training Manager, also moderating. Welcome to the ANA Project Budgeting webinar. This is one of many webinars in a new national webinar series that ANA has launched. Ours is covering different TTA topics. Today's topic is project budgeting. The photo here on our start page here is actually a photo of Perryville. Perryville is the community that owns 3-Star, and the picture is of the actual 3-Star point, which is a geographic point. You can see our black volcanic sand beaches. It's a beautiful location, and but also extremely remote on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. Okay, so next we're going to go over briefly some protocols and tips on using BB Collaborate. Angela?
Good morning. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear, so if you have any problems with that, please go ahead and message me in the text box on the left-hand side. We ask that you would mute your phone and turn off your speakers if you're on a laptop rather than using a headset, so that this avoids echoes for everyone. There is a raise your hand icon if you're looking in the chat box area, and there's also a polling button which we will use later, as well as you will have an opportunity to type. And it'll be a little bit of a race. You'll have to raise your hand. The first 5 folks that raise their hand, you'll have an opportunity to do some typing and responding on our whiteboard. And the chat box for questions is down here at the bottom. I will try to capture questions along the way, and at the end we will also open it up for audio questions.
Great, thank you, Angela. Okay, well, today we're going to be discussing project budgeting, and this is a high-level overview of the agenda. We're doing the basic introductions now. After that, we're going to discuss an overview of the project development process and where budgeting falls within that process. Then we're going to talk about assessing your internal and external resources and your assets. And then we're going to look at a simple budgeting tool for allocating costs that, in my experience, has been helpful in planning out projects, small and large. And then finally, at the end, we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty budgeting mechanics and look at formats for ANA budgets and some general guidance on budgeting. So that's the agenda, and you'll see as we go through, we'll bring up this agenda again for each section. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is one of the new ANA webinar series, and this was just launched. So, in this series, we have the application development series, the evaluation series, the sustainability series, and the project implementation series. Each of them are a 4-part series, and if you complete all 4 of the webinars in each particular series, we will be issuing certificates of completion. The schedule for each of these is on the national website, and you can also find it. We're also posting the schedules in our regional website for Alaska. That's www.anaalaska.com. And I'll put that in the chat board. And just as a note, we're in the process of updating our website and revamping it somewhat. So hopefully in a week or two we'll get the new, refreshed website, regional website, live. So we're looking forward to that. Just a little bit about who we are. The ANA contracts with regional technical assistance providers. We work for the Alaska region, or we run the Alaska region Training and Technical Assistance Center. We're 3-Star Enterprises, LLC. We're an Alaska Native corporation. We're owned by the Oceanside Corporation, which is the Ainska Village Corporation for Perryville. Perryville is in a Alutiiq, Sugpiaq community. The descendants of Perryville actually originate from Katmai area. But 100 years ago, Nova erupted and completely buried the traditional village sites. So Captain Perry in the Coast Guard cutter Manning happened to be in that area, and a lot of the tribal members anticipated a large eruption. They congregated along the coast, and Captain Perry brought them over to Kodiak Island. And then after the ash settled, he brought the descendants of Perryville south, down about 200 miles on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, originally to Ivanhoe Bay, and then north to Perryville. And that was 100 years ago. We just celebrated the centennial. So a little bit about our team. We have, in our contract, we've got 3 core staff. Donnie Flegel just started as our technical assistance manager. We're really pleased to have her on board. She's got a lot of experience in rural development, both on the for-profit side and the nonprofit side. Angela Camus is our training manager, and she's been with us from the get-go. She's got tons of experience in organizational development, business coaching, and rural development. Myself, I'm a former tribal administrator for the native village of Quinhagak, and I also worked as a temporary administrator for Tuluxac. Both are Yupik communities in the YK Delta in southwestern Alaska. And mainly it's Quinhagak where I got a lot of my hands-on experience in the trenches. Basically started as a one-man operation. The tribal president walked me into the tribal office, handed me the broom, showed me where the books were, and showed me the stack of mail that was about 2 feet high, and wished me luck. And from there we dug in and we tapped into every funding source we could find to rebuild the clinic, the roads, 638 contract, our BIA and our IHS services before the IHS moratorium, and did a lot of cool things. We also merged the city and the tribe and transferred the city's funds over to the tribe for tribal management. So in the last 10 years, I've been involved in about 45 million in various competitive funding proposals and projects, and had the privilege of working on projects from the beginning, the conceptual stage, all the way through to implementation and ribbon cutting. So a lot of sleepless nights. Kathy is our Chief Financial Officer, and she's helped us put together some materials. So we're excited to have her on the team, and with her construction cost accounting and business development experience. She's done business plan reviews for the Denali Commission for clinics, and a great member of our team. So just a couple of things about the Alaska region. And we have over 250 of the federally recognized tribes, which is about half of the federally recognized tribes in the United States. You can see here where Perryville is located down on the Alaska Peninsula. And then a little bit later I'll talk about a case study in Chignik, which the tribe authorized me to share. And then our consulting office is located in Wasilla. So just so you get a sense of the challenges we face, for me to go to Perryville, I have to fly down to King Salmon, and it's $1,100 airfare round trip, and the flights have been cut dramatically because of the increase in costs. Alaska is broken up into different tribal groups. Our tribe and corporation is Alutiiq, and had a long history of contact with the first Russians that came, and so a lot of our board members actually have Russian last names, and the Russian Orthodox Church is still active in Perryville. In southeast, you have the Tlingit, Haida, Eyak, and Tsimshian, and most of my experience is in the Yupik and Chupik area of the state. Interior, Donnie Flegel is on our staff. She's from McGrath. And in the north, we have the Nukpak and St. Lawrence Island Yupiks. Okay, so now, Angela, we got a participant poll for the participants here.
Okay, so right up under your name in the participant box, you will see a smiley face and a hand, and there's also an A. And this is where we'd like you to start your poll. I can see some of you are already in there. So if you would select which describes you and use your polling button for your project budgeting years of experience. Wow. So we have a wide range. We have folks with 0 to 1 years, so some very new individuals, to a good percentage of long-timers, and a couple that didn't have any experience. Very interesting. Well, each of you should be able to get some great tidbits out of the rest of today. Anthony?
Okay, apologize, get ahead of myself there. Okay, so next we're going to talk about an overview of the project development process. And in this section, we're going to highlight where project budgeting fits within that process. Some of the pitfalls that you might run into if you don't address some of the bigger organizational issues and bring on board partners to your project, and some of the pitfalls of scope creep, and basically not ensuring that the scope that you've got for your project is matched with the resources you have available. So those are some of the high-level things we want to touch on that really are critical to the success of your project, more so than well, not more so, but anyway, it's critically important to the success of your projects.
So when we look at your project development process, there is numerous items. And as you can see, none of these are standalone items. Each of these is integrated one to the other. But two that stand out together are assessing your available resources and assets and developing a project cost estimate. And again, these are not standalone because this entire 11 steps represent the scope of your project and all of the needs that will go into it. Anthony?
Okay, so one of the challenges that we face with project budgeting is we understand that the community need is vast, in all of our communities. And when we're faced with trying to develop a project, let alone the project budget, we're trying to address that community need, and it's always a challenge to work within the resources that we have available and make sure that our project is addressing the community need, but that we're not basically biting off more than we can chew, or that we don't have enough resources in place to make the project successful. So what we did here is we try to illustrate with these different concentric rings where you've got the total community need, you've got a small pot of money that's A&A each year that you could potentially apply for, that's only going to meet a portion of that community need. And then, of course, the minimum 20% project cost match, that's 20% of the total project, so that's just a little bit more resources that you have to bring to the table, usually through partners and some of your in-house resources. And then, hopefully, as you bring on different partners, you're able to leverage additional resources as a result of this project to meet even more of the community need. And in some cases, we've seen even some organizations exceeding their own expectations about what type of leveraging they were able to bring to bear. And actually, it's phenomenal when we've done some of the impact evaluations, how many people stepped up to the plate and contributed resources that weren't originally anticipated. So in some of those stellar examples, we've seen how one small project has mobilized the community and allowed them to meet an even greater community need. So this is an illustration of that process. And what it all hinges on is your partnerships, and this leveraging it is key to that. So another view of this is the previous one is your total community need, and this one we're looking at just the scope of your project. So a lot of times the challenge and the temptation is to try to take on more scope than you can really afford with your small A&A, with the relatively small A&A grant. So you have to make sure that you align your total project resources with the scope. Those two need to be in alignment. And of course, one of the strategies to that, just like we mentioned in the previous slide, is through leveraging and through partnering. You're able to address your scope challenges by bringing on board those partners. So that's the concept that we're trying to depict here.
Okay, so we're about to have the little challenge that I talked about. So if you can find your hand and raise your hand, the first 5 folks, I'm going to have you type into the slide telling us what are some examples of how scope might exceed your resources. Well, we got one, Sandra, and then Sonia. So if you click over to the side and use your A button, you will be able to start typing onto the lines. Come on, 3 more. 3 more volunteers.
I'm not quite sure how to get on there. I'm still trying.
Maria. Okay, so when you look to the side of the participants near your name, there's a pointer, a star, a drawing pen, and an A with some lines that looks like maybe a piece of paper. Select that, then click the actual A, and you'll see another box show up that'll show you a color and a sans type size. And then if you just click right onto the paper, the screen, you'll actually just be able to start typing. And then who do I have? So I have Sandra, Sonia, Maria, Allison, I need one more volunteer. How's everybody doing? Did they find the A? Just start typing as soon as you find it and click onto the screen.
Do I sign in as citizen?
All right, we got one.
Hello?
There we go. I'm sorry.
Hello?
Say that again. Hi. Hi, Allison. So I have Sandra, Sonia, Maria, and Allison.
Hello? I don't know how to log in. How do you?
You should be.
Are you guys on a website or
Yes.
what do I get to?
I will push out the link for that. And if you go ahead and mute your phone, give me just a minute. Oh, I got a couple.
Sonia, are you there?
Oh, I got a couple.
Siobhan is here. Can you hear me? This is Shanna from Taslima.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
This is Shanna. Can you hear Shanna? Yeah, I can. There's a lot of feedback and echo. Okay. All right. I'm launching into the Blackboard now.
Okay, well, we have a couple here. Oh, there's another one. Okay, so we have the needs exceed the actual funds, outside factors, catastrophic weather, we have more staff than anticipated to meet the need to carry out the project, and the area chosen to service might encompass too much for too many people. That's great. Thank you all for participating.
Okay, so on the subject of partnering and resources that you're bringing to bear to your project, what are your internal resources? That's the first question. What do you have accessible in-house that you can use and allocate towards your budget? And usually this is in the context of meeting the matching requirements, whether it's in-kind match or cash match. What people, what expertise or positions do you have on staff that can provide project support? Can any of those existing staff afford the time to support a new project? And if so, what percent of the time would they be available? What equipment and supplies and material might you have available that you could allocate to your project? These are just some of the things that you need to start thinking about, especially when you're meeting just the minimum match in order to be able to apply for ANA funds, for example. But also these apply to, well, when we get into the external resources, we'll talk about it too. So what are your internal resources that you can bring to bear? That's the first step. Second, Angela, you want to talk about external resources? Okay, hey Angela, you got to turn your mic on.
Whoops, sorry about that. Thought I clicked that. I'm just babbling on to y'all. Okay, so when you're looking at external partnerships, you want to know who's willing to partner with you on your project. What public and state, local organizations, other departments would be that internal. So again, we're going to think external. And as Anthony mentioned, bringing those MOUs to bear and looking at what are the things that they're going to contribute. What is their value to your project? So not just getting them to write that letter that says, yes, we think this is a good project. It's that letter that says to the funding organization, we think this is such a great project, and we are going to give you some of my time, some materials, some advertising, and all of those other sorts of resources.
So everything we're talking about now is really the gist of matching in-kind contributions. In-kind is the value of non-cash contributions directly benefiting a grant-supported project or program. And we've already discussed a few examples. They could be real property, equipment, donations, supplies, or other expendable property, goods, or services. It's important when you're documenting your in-kind that you need to quantify it explicitly. So we've got an example here, like for office space, the cost per square foot, and the number of months that you're contributing it for. And in the case of office space, you typically base it on the fair market value. Angela?
One of the things that is really important is knowing how much your total project cost is. What is my match? A pitfall that we'll see is, as you can see looking here, each of the various funding opportunities have a different level of allowable thresholds in their budget periods. And the match will fluctuate along with that. So oftentimes we see, oh, I'm going to go for the whole bucket, but then you cannot come into that whole bucket of match money. Anthony?
Okay, so the way that you address your match is to document it in your commitment letters. And I've, in my past experience, before working for the TTA Center, writing some A&A grants, so this is really the area that we focused on in the beginning, along with the project scoping and community need and community involvement, is pinning down your partners, pinning down your commitments in writing, and focusing on that up front, because that will determine how much match and how much leveraging you can bring to bear, and that will also impact what your total A&A resources are that you can apply for, and also the number of years on a project. It really does come down to how much of that, how many partners you have, and what commitments in writing you can get. So we wanted to give you a couple of tools. One of them is a commitment letter, a sample, and I'm going to send that out to you. You should get it here in a second. And raise your hand if you got that. Great. Okay, so what I sent out to you is just a sample commitment letter, and in there it defines, like we showed in the example, for any type of commitment, quantifying it in terms of dollars, and making sure that that you have the period that the commitment is valid for. One thing that I found effective in these commitment letters, sometimes organizations are reluctant to commit unless they know you're going to be getting the funding. So you I've added in some cases a caveat that it's subject to the award of funding. Sometimes that helps more bureaucratic organizations to make that commitment. The other way of documenting commitment is through MOAs, and these are a little bit more formal, but really a really good tool and instrument to use in documenting the roles and responsibilities of partners you bring to a project. So I'm going to send out an example of an MOA that we got off the Tribal Youth site, Department of Justice. I'll send that out now. And what I like about this example is that it's short and sweet. So you might find that helpful. So we've given you 2 examples of tools you can use to pin down your partnerships and your commitments. And like I said earlier, invest the time up front in building those partnerships and getting those commitments in place. Okay, so now I'm going to go through an example of a tool that I've used in some of my project budgeting, and there's a little bit of strategy built into the tool that I'll briefly discuss, and then I'm going to pull up a case study of an actual complex project that involved multiple funding sources, and that really is the wave of the future. I mean, as things get tighter, we're going to be looking at, in order to fund projects, we're going to have to tap into multiple, even more funding sources than before to be successful. So I'll send this little Excel spreadsheet out. So you can try it on your own. And this is the blank version of it, just a screenshot of it. And mainly what I want to show here is that you've got your total project costs, and these are the typical federal budget cost categories. And then across the right, you have your potential matching sources. Now, ANA, when you submit your ANA budget, you only have to have 1 column for your non-federal match, but as you're actually planning out your project, it's helpful to actually call out each of these potential matching sources. And what I found very effective is to put your most restrictive funding sources first and your least restrictive last. So the way this plays out is, your discretionary funding ends up being your wild card in terms of making a budget whole, because there's no strings attached typically to your discretionary matching or funding. So that is really helpful. That's the money that you want to use to kind of plug in the holes once you budget your more restrictive pots of money. So I'll give you an example here in the next slide. This is just a small emergency manager project. Total cost $94,000. Hypothetically speaking, we're going to pursue some ANA funds for this project for a year at $75,200, and we have a couple of very restrictive pots of money. This equipment grant that can only be used on equipment. So in this instance, I'm showing you where we've allocated that first, this $5,000, and then we have another restricted grant that will only cover some contractual, so we allocate that next. And then over here, as you allocate costs across these columns, it'll show what's left to allocate. And so you can see at this point in the game, we still have $75,200 to allocate to make this project whole, and that's going to fall in the ANA column. So that'll be the next slide where I'm showing it fully allocated. So here, everything has been allocated. We budgeted the most restrictive pots of money first, and then we've allocated the rest to this ANA column. So those are just some principles in using this tool on how it can help you as you try to build a conceptual project budget. So I want to give an example of where we did this, but in sort of a big way. The community of Chignik, and I talked to the council before I put this on the screen. They authorized me to go ahead and share these details. Chignik is located on the Alaska Peninsula, and it's remote like Perryville. It's just north of Perryville. The thing about Chignik that's unique is although the population in that area is small, we have a huge influx of processors and fishermen during the fishing season. And they're extremely remote. The closest hospital is actually in Dillingham, and to get there, you got to fly over these mountains up to King Salmon over here and cut across the bay. And you know that's hundreds of miles, and also very expensive. And the weather is severe a lot of times, so you can't even get across the peninsula. So healthcare and having adequate health facilities in Chignik was really important to the tribal council. And some of the council members had own family members that were affected and by the lack of access. So that spurred the need for this clinic.
Okay.
Now in this case study, well, ANA does not fund construction costs, but what ANA did fund in this project was the community planning and the upfront investment in the tribal systems, the management systems, to be able to plan a project and to reach out to local partners. So that aspect of it was covered by ANA. But what was amazing in the process is that in order to fund...
Anthony, I need to interrupt for just a minute. The teleconference line is has a horrible, horrible echo, and the only way that I can fix this at the moment is if I can make sure that everyone on the teleconference please has their speakers on their computers off, and if possible, to mute your phones, although we have the phone line muted itself. I'm hoping that will fix it, and if folks can let me know. I've done a couple other things on my end. Sorry, Anthony.
Okay. I'll just proceed. Have we muted the teleconference line? Looks like we've muted it. Okay. All right, so I was just discussing in this scenario how we had to tap into multiple funding sources, and it just shows you that in order to be, to be successful in a project, you got to be very resourceful. And it was amazing. We even hit funding sources as far away as California, the RCAC, that we didn't know about prior to the project. In this example, we used Denali Commission funding, mental health funding, Indian Health Service, a model project with NAHASDA, an ICDBG, some compact funds, 638 compact, IRR funds to build the access to the site, and the boat ramp down to the water. Foundation funding, RCAC, Rural Community Assistance Corporation, I believe it's called, financing. Fisheries donations, donations from the Pebble mining project. And then the council donated their own funds and held fundraisers on Kodiak Island. So, it just goes to show what it takes nowadays to fund a project from multiple pots of money. And using that tool I showed you before was one of the things that helped us to map that out and plan it. Okay, so now we're looking at going into some of the mechanics of project budgeting. We're going to look at the ANA budget summary format, the narrative format, allowable costs, and look at some of the budget line items. Okay, so Angela?
So when we look at a budget summary and the narrative, one of the largest things to keep in mind is that you are looking to have all of your line items in your summary built out and discussed, and what you're trying to do is show there's a need for those particular line items. And we'll talk a little bit more about the line items. Remember that you are discussing your project funding, such as your A&A budgeting monies, as well as the non-federal resources, your total project cost match, the 20%, and the total. They should all be there. And each of these should be realigned back into your strategy. So when you've discussed your approach and strategy, we shouldn't see any surprises here. So if you're looking to buy a copier because maybe you're making some books, don't forget to tell us that in the written piece and bring it back into the budget. And then again, reminding us why they are reasonable costs. Maybe you've gone out and gotten a couple of estimates and you're going to show that. And again, to make sure that each budget summary is done for each project year, showing total project cost, non-federal share, and the budgeted monies, along with using the 424A Section B, your budgeting category. So one of my slide advance isn't working. Thanks, Anthony.
Yep. Before we go into this, I'm going to go ahead and send this tool out. And just a word of caution, this was a template we got from A&A, but it was done in Word, and so I found a few little, had to make a few corrections, and I believe I've caught all of them. But we want you to look at the general format here as far as how to lay this out, and I'm going to go ahead and send that to you right now. Give me 1 second.
And so when you're applying for your funding, you will be doing this within the scope of the allotted time frame that each of the federal funders sets out. For example, A&A will be coming out with several funding opportunity announcements, and you will write your project and submit your budget and your narratives all together. I realize this is a budget, but I'm trying to give you a little bit bigger picture here. And they're all going to come together and you'll meet that deadline for submission. So again, when you're looking at this, you have your categories. You're talking about your budgeting line items, and you were talking about your personnel, the totals with those, the fringe, and we're going to talk about each of these a little more in detail, just trying to give you some quick overviews. You want to make sure you have your total project budget, your federal share from A&A, and again your non-federal share, which is your 20% total project costs. And that, next slide. And this is one possibility to use as a narrative format, and that is showing it, putting it in a table form. And earlier when I was talking about you're going to break out your items and give us some more detail, so again, here's an example of your project manager is the category. This is their particular title. The funding is $45,000 a year. They are not matched. They're going to be paid directly out of the grant monies. And this tells us how many hours, what their hourly rate is, and a brief description of what their duties will be, very brief. And it's a reminder to see the activities that are being set out in the objective work plan. So again, in your narrative, you're going to break out your same budgeting line item categories to match your line item budget. You're just here, this is where you're going to give us further details. Here's some more of the narrative. When you're looking at office space, you're telling them how much the office space happens to cost you. You've probably gotten a square footage estimate of what it costs to rent a similar space, how many months you're going to need that, and in this particular instance, it is being used as part of the match money. And then at the end, you are still breaking out your total costs, your subtotals, your indirect costs, and then your total project cost. Even these go into your budget justification.
So, actually I'm going to go back there real quick. So what you can see here is on the match side, that 41,000 is roughly, I think, just slightly over 20% of the total project cost of 204,000. And if you do this in Excel, it's nice to put that little calculation in there so you can monitor as you're adding your match in to make sure you are exceeding that 20%. Angela?
So another form that goes along with this is filling out your 424A. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. There are very explicit instructions, but this takes the first year of your funding and breaks it out, and it's a required form. And there's actually a couple webinars been done, which is why I say I'm not going to go into this too highly today, but there's very specific instructions. But one thing I want to put out is that it talks about your forecasted needs for your federal and non-federal share. And oftentimes what we see here is you've taken your requested budget and just divided by 4 and done the same thing for your non-federal share. This runs you into a little bit of difficulties when the funders begin to look at how much money you're actually spending and how much money you're drawing down. If you have a lot of upfront costs, it could look like you're overspending and that you're not going to have enough money left. So when you do this, we suggest that you try to break these costs out as close as possible to your actual spending needs so that it doesn't look like you're going to spend too much and not have enough money, or that you're not spending enough and maybe there's something wrong and going wrong in the project.
Okay, so as far as allowable costs, basically we have the OMB cost circulars that provide guidance, and then those are codified in 45 CFR. I'm going to send out a tool that the Pacific region developed that gives you an overview of different elements of costs and which costs are allowable, which costs are allowable with prior approval, and which costs are definitely not allowable. So this is coming to you right now. And there are some minor differences between state and local tribal governments versus nonprofits. There are also, for tribes, like tribes operating 638 programs, the 638 statute itself speaks to allowable costs. So sometimes the tribes have a little bit more liberal guidance on allowable costs. So I sent that out. And then now we're going to talk briefly about some of the line items in the budget. Angela?
So personnel was one of those line items that you saw in the not only the line item, but the budget justification. And this is where you're going to look at your employee's salary and wages. And again, as I had pointed out before, you want to show that title, their time commitment. When you're doing their time commitment, you want to get their total hours per month times the number of months and show what percentage of a full-time equivalent this will be. And if your tribe or organization has a different definition of FTE, so if it's not 40 hours but 37 hours is full-time, you want to note those items for both ANA, so that when they are going through your budget, they understand that why there may be a difference in your total hours versus if they were looking at it from a 40-hour perspective. Okay. There we go. The fringe has to do with your payroll taxes. This is the employer portion and the staff benefits. This is your SUTA, FUTA, unemployment, your insurance, your retirement, your 401k, Social Security, FICA, workers' comp, Medicare, and who knows what else. And so this is where I say that your accounting department is your new best friend. You want to go see whoever's in charge of your payroll and ask them to give you the breakdowns for the people that will be in the contract or in your grant, both on the federal and the non-federal share. They have all those numbers at their fingertips and the percentages, and then all you have to do is type them in to your spreadsheets.
And keep in mind that if you're, that those percentages can vary from employee to employee. So next we've got a little fun exercise to poll, and we agreed that Angela's leading our poll. So Angela, take it away.
Okay, so remember those little ABC buttons. Does anybody on the webinar now know what fringe benefit percentages for their full-time program directors? 20 to 21, 26 to 30, you don't know, 31 or greater. And that alpha button is right above and underneath your name. Okay, so as you can see, there's a large variance even with those here in the webinar, and several folks aren't even sure what that fringe benefit percentage is. That's why the accounting department is your new best friend.
So one other thing related to that is, although it differs from region to region, our fringe benefit rates in Alaska are really high because of our healthcare costs. But for part-time employees, it's usually a much lower rate. So when you're doing your budgeting, you need to find out, what your fringe rate is for your part-time employees versus your full-time employees. And our CFO put together a guide that I'm going to send out. Keep in mind that it's really impossible to do a national fringe benefit guide, and you always need to talk to your accounting department to get your own unique fringe rates. But Kathy, our CFO, put some guidance together to give you an overview of how these rates are calculated, and I just sent that out to you, so I hope you find that helpful. And thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so travel. You want to talk about your destination, the reason that the travel is needed. Don't forget your things, your airfare, hotel, per diem. One of the things is to use the government per diem rates or your organization's rates, whichever the policies are at your organization or within your tribe. And if they have it allowable to use the GSA per diem, that's great. And some organizations don't allow that. Two of the big things that are the don't forget reminders, the post-award training costs for 2 people. Those are ANA required monies into your line item budgets. And then each federal funder has different requirements. One of the things for ANA is that consulting travel will go under your other line item, not under the same travel with your employees.
Okay.
Then
I want to
go
through these pretty quickly here, Angela. We want a few minutes for
you
questions.
have your budget line items, your supplies, which I think most folks know what supplies are. And my mouse is sticking. Here we go. Does anybody know what the threshold for equipment is? Okay. The answer is B. It is $5,000 for equipment, the threshold. So anything under that is considered a supply. So keep that in mind. And it doesn't matter if you're buying 5 laptops at $1,000, they are still considered supplies because it's the per item piece. And your contractual, this is the secondary third-party costs. These are folks that are going to do a portion of the contract without your input. If they have that, you're going to go under the other line item. And we had an exercise here, but since I'm running out of time, I want to be able to get to questions. So I'm going to skip that. Your indirect costs, one of the most important thing that I want you to remember here is that every organization has different indirect cost rates negotiated with the federal government, and there's always exceptions. So do you remember your new best friend, your accounting department? They're still your new best friend here. So please see them. They have that paperwork and can help you with lining that out. Program income. This is when you have created something, you're going to sell it, you're going to bring in some extra monies. The important thing to remember here is that ANA utilizes the addition method. This means that in addition to your federal fund, you get to spend out your program income. So think about that while you're adding into your project budgeting. Okay.
Okay, we had a few questions and answers. There was a question about cost increases and how do you adjust for that, I think on the fringe rates. So you have to do an annual budget summary and narrative for each year of your project. So I would just address those inflationary increases in your narratives. There was another question about reasonableness of costs and how to document that. That again is something you would address in your narrative, your justification, to show or explain how those costs are reasonable.
You'll also tie that into your project approach. You'll be explaining why this particular item is important, especially if it's a larger item.
And there's I think it's the cost price index that's published every year. It's like 2 or 3% typically. That's one way to estimate your inflationary increases.
There was a question about budget justification. whether the line item budget does not take the place of a budget justification, they go together. You need to have both the line item budget and the budget justification. And I'm going to open this up and allow a couple other folks to ask some questions. Is there any other questions?
Hi, this is Francis.
Oh.
One more time, sorry.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, this is Francis. I was wondering, would these this slideshow thing, are we able to save it?
We can push the slide presentation out to you in a PDF format. We can email that actually.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I put a link to our evaluation form in the chat box, so we'd really appreciate it if you could click on that and just briefly fill it out and just give us some feedback on how we can improve our webinars. So yeah, we've really enjoyed this opportunity to share with you project budgeting, and look forward to the next, check the schedule for the next webinars coming out, both on the national website and the regional websites. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And
please feel free to email us with any additional questions that we did not get to today. Anthony, can you put my email address and yours in the chat box? My chat box isn't working.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. This is unintended increase. My chat box is not working, I don't think.
I think you have your speakers on. You need to turn those off. You could type into the chat box and I'll try to respond.
Sonia, are you there?
Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up, so please email your questions to us. Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up, and thanks for your questions to us. And thanks for
Sonia, are you there?
Thank you.